Well, good afternoon, folks. It's September 22nd, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. My name is Aaron Boley. I'm a technical solutions architect at Cisco, and I want to thank everyone here for joining us here in this discussion. Let me just put my PowerPoint slides up here real quick, and we'll get started. Now, I have been told I talk very rapidly. I'm going to attempt to slow down just a little bit today in order to be understood here. So we're going to talk today as part of this demo series. We're going to cover a high-level overview of DNA Center. We're going to cover a lot of topics in this discussion, so strap in and get prepared for the ride. So again, my name is Aaron Boley, Technical Solutions Architect at Cisco. I'm part of Cisco's Global Virtual Engineering team. You may interact with me or a number of other folks in my team. If you partner together, if you reach out to your Cisco account teams or your Cisco partner teams, they can pull in resources from GVE in order to further your discussions with DNA Center or any other Cisco platform for that matter. So keep that in mind. So I encourage you, if you have questions, I certainly encourage you to place those questions in the Q&A during this discussion. If you have questions afterwards, I strongly encourage you, reach out to your Cisco account team or your partner account team. They can work with Cisco and then, of course, potentially involve GVE in those future discussions. So with that said, let's get started. So if I advance my screen here, so we're all here to talk about DNA Center. Why? Well, DNA Center is indeed the premier, the best network management platform for Catalyst devices, but I have to say we support more than Catalyst devices. Now, if you want to know the comprehensive list, I encourage you, go out to Cisco's website, or you can Google DNA Center compatibility, those three words, DNA Center compatibility. You'll get presented with a little URL that has a tool that allows you to figure out what devices are supported. You're going to see, of course, those Catalyst devices, but you're also going to see some devices such as Cisco's IoT platforms. So all those switches, routers, APs, including the new IR8300 series IoT router, you'll see all those there. All of the Cat9K switches, the Cat9K wireless platforms, and also the Cat8K routers, and a number of other Cisco EN traditional platforms. And then we even support a subset, I need to be clear, a subset of Nexus platforms. So keep that in mind. It is the best network management platform for EN platforms. Now, once you got the platform, you can unlock all those innovations in Catalyst and related supported products. And so when you buy those DNA subscriptions as part of your platform purchases, this is where you get all of those feature innovations that we're going to talk about today during the discussions. Some of those innovations include integrations with Cisco solutions such as WebEx. We'll see that in the discussion, such as Thousand Eyes. Also, Identity Services Engine for those customers who are looking to implement technologies or solutions such as microsegmentation. ICE, Identity Services Engine, that's going to be part of that journey. Also, for those of you who are familiar with DNA Spaces, that's also strong integration into DNA Center. So keep that in mind as part of this discussion. So as we continue on here, many of you, if you're familiar with DNA Center, you might know about the physical appliance, which you may have heard about, especially for those who went to Cisco Live earlier this year. We're announcing a virtual appliance that will be available in the first half of calendar year 2023. So we got two different variants of that. So to be clear, by the end of June 2023, you're going to have three deployment options. You're going to have a physical appliance option, which everyone probably knows about. This is basically a UCS server that has customized DNA Center software all sold together as one packaged appliance. That's available today. Now, for those customers who would prefer to use a cloud-based deployment of the virtual appliance, that's going to be available. That's going to be on AWS. As you see there in the dates, early field trials going on right now. We'll have first customer ship in the November timeframe, and then in the early 2023 calendar timeframe, you're going to see that as generally available for for all customers. Now, if you want to deploy that virtual appliance on your own hardware, on-premise, VMware-based, you'll see here dates on the slides. Early field trial scheduled for November, first customer ship in the March timeframe of next year, and then by June we expect that to be generally available as well. So 3 wonderful options in order for you to deploy DNA Center. Regardless of the deployment model, all the same features supported. Okay, so with that said, that's all the slides. So no death by PowerPoint today, folks. So we're going to cover now a demo environment. And so this is, again, I want to remind everyone, this is an overview. We're not intending to go through every single detail here. This isn't necessarily intended for customers who are already implemented DNA Center and may have some in-depth deployment questions, although feel free, ask whatever questions you want. Also, this demo, it is a limited demo environment. So in other words, I'm telling you things may and will likely not work, but it's a demo environment, so trust me, your experience with DNA Center out there in the field will not look necessarily like some of the hiccups that I may experience here. So with all those caveats set, let's get started. I'm going to go over and share my Google Chrome screen here in just a moment, and then we'll start the demo. Now, one thing before I start the demo, I want to just be clear. You too can access this demo environment. How can you do that? Go out to dcloud.cisco.com. So you can register for an account if you haven't already registered a dcloud account, and you can get on this same system that I'm using. So keep that in mind. Again, it's a closed environment, so you can't break anything. You can get a lot of hands-on experience with no risk, and so play around to your heart's delight. Now, with that said, I've already logged into my dcloud account into my DNA Center environment, and so let's get started. So here we are on the home screen. I like to call this the executive summary screen. Let me walk you through this screen. So if you go up here in the upper left-hand corner, you see these 3 horizontal bars. I know a lot of my colleagues like to, whoa, my laptop just froze here. Hopefully that's just a temporary thing that won't happen again. That's odd. Okay, so these 3 horizontal bars, some of my colleagues like to call this the hamburger menu. So if you click here, you'll get access to the menu system. So that menu's hidden, you click those 3 bars and you get access to those menus. So now in this discussion, we are going to focus on these top 4, the design section, the policy section, the provisioning section, and the assurance section. A lot of other menu items, we won't have time to cover any of them, and frankly, we'll be just scratching the surface on many of the features and functions here in the discussion. Now, this logo button where it says Cisco DNA Center, this actually has a function. It's called the home button. You'll see me click this button a few times during the demo. It brings us back to this home screen. Now, over here, you see this little magnifying glass. This is a search tool. This search tool is very useful for a number of different things. What you can do, you can search for, say, your inventory by hardware platform type. So if I want to search for my Catalyst 9200s, I can just type in 9200. It gives me a list of those 9200s. I could select one of those 9200s, and then I could click on one of these information screens, of which some of these screens we'll talk about. I think we're going to talk about the Device 360 screen during this discussion. We probably will not talk about the topology screen, but we should talk about the inventory screen here if everything goes well. But a lot of different screens that allow you to get really great insights into the operation of the device. So we'll cover that a little bit later. Now, if I can search on other things, like I could search on wired or wireless clients. In this case, I could search an IP address or MAC address or even user name. So in this case, I type in the name Grace, and then I can see Grace has 4 different devices. I could click here on the user name of Grace and then go to a user 360 screen to get detailed information about all 4 of these devices under which Grace Smith is the user. We're going to drill into that a little bit later in our discussion. Another thing that I use the search tool for, if I've forgotten where a menu item is, maybe I forgot where my POE dashboard, I can just start typing POE, and DNA Center gives me a list of all the activities or other information that might be POE related. In this case, I see here, under my activities, I see there's a POE dashboard. That's a wonderful dashboard giving you insights into all the aspects of POE utilization in your network. I could just simply click here on the URL. That's going to take me to the dashboard. So those are just 3 examples of that search tool's utility. Now over here in this question mark, or that circle with the question mark, this is our help menu. Now if you see here, we get information about DNA Center. Now what would we need that for? If you wanted to tell someone, or I can tell you what version we're running, this demo environment is 2.3.3.0, just in case anyone's wondering. So I get that information about what release I'm running. Also, I can get information about the rich and powerful API of DNA Center. Many customers using this in a very creative ways. I can get information about third-party integration and other developer resources. This would be out on Cisco's website called developer.cisco.com. So these two sites are fantastic for those customers on their DevOps journeys who are looking to figure out some creative ways to use the API in maybe to further expand the incredible power of DNA Center. Now, if you click here on contact support, that's going to tell you how to get in touch with TAC. So hopefully everyone out there knows how to do it, but in case you forgot, we can tell you right there. Right here, a new feature, remote support authorization. What is this? Well, this is a way that you can allow TAC, Cisco TAC, to access your DNA Center during troubleshooting or other related network automation or management procedures. So if you need TAC support in order to do some of the functions or to get things working, you can contact TAC and give them remote support authorization. And then finally, one thing I want to cover here is help right there. If you were to click on help from this screen, you're going to get a help screen related to the home page. If you click, if you navigate through DNA Center and you're on a different screen, maybe an inventory screen, and you click on help, you're going to get information related to that inventory screen. So the help screen always gives you context specific or page specific help wherever you're at within DNA Center. Now, as we continue to scroll down here on the home page, first things first, we reference here Cisco has a DNA Center YouTube channel. Check it out if you want to get some visibility into new releases, new features, use cases. A lot of great information there in consumable videos. If we continue to scroll down here, first we see an assurance summary. Now we're going to come back to a lot of this detail as we go through this discussion, but the first thing we see here is the overall health, a summary of the health of the devices, the wireless clients, and the wired clients. And we're going to drill into some of those details a little later. You also get an insight into the critical issues. This is what is DNA Center seeing in terms of your network? Do you have any issues that you need to troubleshoot? In this case, we see we've got 4 priority 1s and 6 priority 2s. Now, we could click view details or we could drill into these 6P2s, but ultimately, this is the area where we're going to do some troubleshooting. So I'll show you that a little bit later. Also over here, trends and insights. DNA Center's working hard to crunch numbers for you to figure out, do you have trends in your network that may look like a problem? We're doing these calculations to give you insights so that when you see a change that may not be an obvious defect in the network, we're giving you at least an idea that there might be something you need to take a look at. Also, we're given a lot of wireless information, especially related to AP performance. Now, as we scroll further down, we get information related to the network in terms of how many sites do you have? How many devices do you have in your inventory? Information such as network profiles, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We talk about the software images, and we'll get into software image management and how you make sure that all your devices are running the right software. We can also scroll further down, we can drill into, and by the way, I should have pointed out, everywhere that you see blue, if my screen colors are coming through properly, if you see black text, well, that's just text. But if you see blue, that means you can click through and get more details. So in this case, my DNA licensing, if I want to click through, I can click on this 105. That's going to give me more detail about all of my licenses. So I could click there and get all that detail. And then finally here, one thing we've added new, the end of life status of the devices in your inventory. So in this demo environment, doesn't appear to have run yet, but we can get information about where are your devices in terms of the end of life milestones. Do you have end of sale devices? Do you have end of software maintenance devices? Or have your devices reached end of support? All of that data would be right there, and you can also run reports to produce that data as well. And then finally, down here at the bottom, we talk about tools. And these tools, by the way, you may have noticed when I was showing the menu, you've got a tools option here. The same tools that we see here are the same tools that you see in the menu. So just a convenient way to see the tools, whether they're here on your homepage or whether they're in the menu structure. Now, in this case, for convenience sake, I may go into one of these areas, but just to give you a flavor, discovery. What is this? Well, for anyone out there who's used discovery tools for other network management platforms, this shouldn't be surprising. You're going to run a discovery job, go out there in the network to find your devices, bring them into the inventory so that you can start to manage them. The topology tool, this is a great way to look at your overall network topology or to drill down into your site or building topology. So really great way to visualize your network that DNA Center builds for you. Command Runner, this is a utility that allows you to issue one or more commands across one or more devices. So very helpful. License Manager, kind of intuitive. You're just looking at your licenses and getting a history of how they're being used. Anything that's going to expire, you'll know all that there. Now, I won't cover all these other ones. Security Advisory is a great utility to figure out if there are any p-certs against the software images running on your devices. And finally, probably for time's sake, I want to drill into Template Editor because it's a convenient place to talk about right here. So let me talk about Template Editor. Now, for those of you out there in your networking journeys, I am guessing, or at least hoping, that everyone's had a similar experience to myself and Brian and Paul on the call here and Tyler. When we configure devices over the course of our networking career, a lot of times we've been copying the config from a notepad file or from a Word file. So why am I talking about that? Well, with Template Editor, it's using that concept in which in Template Editor, all of our templates are contained. Now I've got 4 folders here: onboarding and wide area and IoT and MACsec. And if I were to look into one of these folders, I can look at some individual templates. In this case, if I look at, say, this template called small branch template, if I click there, what I can see is, oh, here's a template. And if you look at this syntax, hopefully everyone will be familiar with this overall syntax. You may not know what all the commands do, but the syntax should look familiar. This is iOS XE config. And at the top here, one thing you may notice, the hostname command. Everyone's probably familiar with that hostname command, but are you familiar with what's after this? You see a $sign hostname. What is that? I'm sure for those of you out there screaming at the screen right now, probably telling me it's a variable. If you were saying that, indeed you are correct. With templates, what we allow you to do is use variables for those device unique parameters. Therefore, if I had, let's say I have 100 small branches in my network, and I want to push that template out to 100 different devices, I can use one template, push that config to 100 devices, and for all the device-specific parameters, that's where these variables would come in. I don't want to name all my devices with the same host name, right? So the host name would be a variable that I could allow DNA Center to read in information from a CSV file, or if I really was a glutton for punishment, I could enter that manually in. I don't think I would do that though. So DNA Center automates this to make it real easy for you to push templates to devices. So team, hopefully that gives you an idea of templates. Now, this is an example of a static template. We've got many different examples of customers that use templates in a more programmatic fashion where you can use Python-like scripting in order to configure devices in conditional formats. Like if you wanted to, for example, put a spanning tree config across every single port that was configured as an access VLAN. You could write a template that basically cycles through all ports and examines, is it a switch port configured as an access port? Then we would put a spanning tree on. If not, it would do nothing. So you've got static templates, but you've also got programmatic templates as well. That's definitely for a more advanced discussion. Now, I want to talk about 3 things that every customer does when you begin using DNA Center. First things first, you go into the design section and you create your network hierarchy. All you're doing here is telling DNA Center, basically, in this example, I've got 5 continents, and you would basically just go in and tell DNA Center, if you've got sites across multiple cities and states and buildings, that's what you do. Okay, Pretty simple. That's called the network hierarchy. Looks like my demo doesn't want to cooperate with me today. Okay, so that's easy. Network hierarchy, it's one of the simplest things you'll do. Okay, now the second thing, remember when I talked about in your tools, you'd go out and do a discovery. I'm not going to go into that for the sake of time. I've figured out over this demo series, it's not worth our time to go into it because it's such a simple function. Like any network management platform, you go to your discovery tool, you discover the devices, and those devices get put into your inventory. So once that discovery takes place, and I didn't mean to click there, once the discovery takes place, then you look at your inventory. And in this case, in our demo environment, what we'll see is that a step has been performed for us that would not be performed for a brand new customer, and this is where the site column is. The third step that every customer would do after you discovered all those devices, what you would do, you would go and tell DNA Center what site is that device located. I don't know why it's not closing down that screen. Apparently, I'm not patient enough to let it go down. So basically what I mean is this site, this would be blank in your initial discovery stage. So what you would go is you would basically go in and select one or more devices. You'd go into actions and click provision and click assign device, assign device to site. And this is where these fields would not be input. And you would simply go in and select where is that particular device located. Very simple. So team, those are the three steps. Create your hierarchy, discover your devices, and then assign devices to whatever sites they're located at. And at that point, then the fun begins. Then we can start to use the power of DNA Center for automations, for assurance, for policy. So let me click my home button here. We're going to go back to the home screen here. Looks like my browser's waiting here. All right, so let's cover some use cases. So first things first, network settings. Let's go into there and tell you what that's about. So network settings is a great place to be able to make changes to common parameters across the network in a very easy fashion. So let's take a look. We can change AAA server information, for example, whether it's ICE or a traditional AAA server. We can change DHCP or DNS or NTP or time zone or message of the day information. So this is just one tab in the network settings screen. Now imagine if you had to change your NTP server across the network, what would you do? Well, in this case, we could write a script to go across all our devices if you're a scripting team, or you could log into all the devices one by one, and that would take some time. Or you could do this. You could simply change the device or the NTP server address. You could change it to 106, and then you could simply click Save, and DNA Center is going to push that new parameter, update all the devices with that new parameter, and you had to do no scripting, no logging into devices. Now, that makes things really easy. As many times as I've had to do this in my 21 years at Cisco, 31 years in the industry, this makes things very easy. This is one of the simple use cases of DNA Center to apply parameters across the entire network. Now, some of you may be asking, well, let's say I didn't want to apply that globally, but maybe I only wanted to apply it to my United States sites in Texas. Could I do that? Well, that's where that network hierarchy matters, because if I only wanted to change the parameters for sites in Texas, absolutely I could do that. For example, I can see here DHCP server. This is inherited from the global parameters. But if I wanted to overwrite that here and say 125, for example, I could do that right here, and that would only change the DHCP server parameters for sites in Texas, so in Austin and San Antonio. It would not change anything in New York, California, or San Antonio, or anywhere else in the network. So the concept of inheritance and the concept of hierarchy is a powerful aspect of DNA Center. It allows you to make changes on a global basis or a regional basis or a state level or whatever the hierarchical level, you're able to make those changes. That's network settings. Now, another example, if you had to go out and change SNMP read-write credentials or HTTPS read-write credentials or your CLI credentials, you could make those changes, again, on a global basis or anywhere in the hierarchy. So very easy to make these changes. So no more scripting, no more logging in devices for those types of parameters. Many other examples of network settings that you can change. For time's sake, I'm going to keep that, or I'm going to limit it to those two examples. Now, so we covered network settings. Let's look at the image repository, just kind of going through the menu items here. So image repository, what is this and why would you care? Well, we're trying to make it easy for you to keep your software deployment consistent across your devices. This helps in many reasons, including keeping your security surface vectors limited to make sure that you're running the right software with the right feature sets without any defects. So image repository, this is where you keep all of your software images in one location. So we can see that they're organized by hardware platform. In this case, I can see the Catalyst 9300, 9200s, and IE3K switches, etc. So let's click into the 9300 as an example. So if we click there, we're going to get details about all of the images for the Catalyst 9300 in this network. And we see that we've got a lot of different images, including 1761, iOS XE 1733, 1731, etc. Now, if we go over here, take note of this golden image column. You can see here we have starred 17.6.1. What does this mean? Well, I'm sure hopefully many of you may already know this, but we are telling DNA Center that we are administratively selecting 17.6.1 as the image that we desire to be on our Catalyst 9300s. Once you do that, once you select this as the golden image, DNA Center starts working for you to make software upgrades easy. So that administrative action triggers DNA Center to do some homework for you. I'm going to show you that homework in just a few minutes, but I just want to be clear. This is where we download software into the image repository. This is where we tell DNA Center what software do we want running on our hardware platforms. In this case, if I want a different image on a 9200 versus a 9300 versus a Catalyst 9500, this is all very easy to do. In addition, now I know many customers may not need this type of flexibility, but if you had Catalyst 9300s in a core role versus an access role and you wanted to have a different golden image, you could absolutely do that. You could use the concept of device roles here in order to make sure that some devices or some 9300s had 1761, but you could have a different golden image for, say, access 9300s, and you could maybe put 1733 on there. So lots of flexibility in terms of golden image management. So team, that is image repository. Now we're going to cover software upgrades a little bit later in this discussion, so hang with me here. Now, so we go further into the menu items. We covered hierarchy and settings and image repository. And now let's talk briefly about network profiles. Now, in my demo environment, I'm not able to edit any of these profiles, so I'm going to have to talk to some of this. But for example, if I were to try to edit this, it just does nothing. The demo system is locked in this regard. So if you get onto dCloud and do this demo environment, you will have some limitations. So keep that in mind. But what are network profiles? Because we're in the network profiles section. So what does this actually do? And in this case, the one key aspect of network profiles is if you remember those templates that we talked about. So templates, you can think of them as configuration files. Now you can combine multiple templates together and bind them together and attach them to network profiles. And what network profiles allow you to do is you can assign, if you see here in the network profiles screen here, you can see that this network profile is attached to two sites. So if I click there, I can see it's attached right here to this San Francisco 10 and that floor. And so basically what that tells DNA Center is that if I attach certain templates to this network profile, by default, when I start to provision devices, DNA Center has an idea of the templates that you should want to check or utilize against that device. So it's a very convenient way to allow DNA Center to know, oh, I need to assume this template is going against this site. So it's just a convenient way to structure tying templates against locations to make provisioning easier. So Let's see here. Now next, so we've covered a lot of the information here in the design section. So let's cover provisioning. I'm going to skip over policy just for the time being. We'll come back to that, and I want to cover provisioning. So first in the provisioning menu here, well, let's cover plug and play first. This is a really popular feature that I want to make sure everyone knows about. So plug and play, why would you care about this? Now, if you think about many of us who have deployed many network devices in our network deployments, think about the times that you've ever had to ship a device to your central location. You stack the device or one or more devices, on some table. You plug your laptop in, plug a console cable in, and you start to put CLI config and software across all these devices manually. Now, that's an acceptable way to deploy devices. And then you got to ship the device to the location once you've done that. Now, in this case, you don't need to do that with plug and play. With plug and play, as long as once you power up the device and plug it into the network, as long as that device can get an IP address and a DNS entry, that device can connect to your plug and play network here with DNA Center. So in effect, what will happen is once you plug that device in, it can reach out to DNA Center and it will show up in your unclaimed inventory. And so you see here, I can see that I've got a number of devices here that are not yet claimed, and I can start that claiming process. So in this case, let's say I want to select this Catalyst 9200 right here. So let's go in here, we can click Actions and Claim and start a very easy process. So once we do this, we should get a screen here that shows us, okay, my demo's just not liking me today, but we can go in, and so we know that by default the device name is the same as the serial number. In this case, let's just say I'll name the device Switch 1, if I can spell correctly here. So we'll call it Switch 1, and if you remember, we have to tell DNA Center where is that device going to be located. So in this case, I'll click here on Assign, and let's just say I'm going to search for San Francisco 10, and I'm going to assign that device to San Francisco Building 10. So in a moment here, so now we know I've renamed the device, I've assigned it to San Francisco 10, and we'll continue the process. In this case, we can see that DNA Center automatically assigns 1761. You may be asking, why did it do that? Well, if you remember our image repository, we assign golden images. This is why DNA Center made the assumption that 1761 is the image that we want. Could we change that? Absolutely, we could. In this case, we see the template, that CLI config that's supposed to be on the device. We can click right here to assign it. And once we scroll down here, we have a choice of those templates. Well, let's just select that small branch template that I referenced before. We can click right there, click Save, and now we can continue on in the journey of provisioning. If we click Next here, basically DNA Center brings me to the provisioning template screen. In this case, I'm only deploying one device. So when I click on the device, what you'll see here is, if you remember that template had a variable called hostname, I could manually type the hostname right here. I could do that, right? And that's perfectly acceptable for one device. But imagine I was provisioning 100 devices. Anyone out there want to manually type in 100 switch names or host names? Probably not. So in this case, if I were going to do that, what I would do is I would go into Import Template Parameters. This allows DNA Center to import a CSV file that would make you not have to manually enter host names, but you could simply import the host names via CSV. In this case, because it's one device, I'm just going to type in the device or the host name there. And then I can click Next. And this is the last stage. If I clicked Claim, it's going to start claiming that device. But before I do that, I just want to be clear. I also have the option to preview the config. Now, if we click here on Preview Config, we can look at a lot of the information that DNA Center is going to push. We can get device information details there. And one thing, if we click on Template CLI Preview here, if we scroll down, remember, if you remember that template, the template itself had hostname, $hostname. But remember, I input the actual hostname here. So this is the actual CLI that's going to be deployed to the device. So in essence, you're going to get the real CLI preview right here. So if I had 100 devices that were being provisioned as part of Plug and Play right now, you would get the actual CLI, not the template, but the actual CLI with the variables filled in here. Team, this is how easy Plug and Play is. If I were to click Claim, DNA Center is going to go out, provision the CLI, provision the software, provision the licenses, everything related to getting that device up and running, and all you had to do was plug in and power up the device. That is plug and play, okay? So let's go back to our menu here. So if I click on provisioning, let's go to the inventory screen. So the inventory screen is where we can do and view a lot of different things. Now in this case, I'm going to go to my global inventory just to get a high level global view. So that screen's going to refresh here in just a moment. A lot of different things here we can do from the global inventory screen. Now, let's talk about software upgrades first. I referenced that DNA Center does some work for you after you selected that golden image. If you recall me saying that, well, in this case, what I'm going to do is in this screen, I have the ability to change the focus of the screen. What does that mean? Well, if you see all these little columns here, I have many, many columns. If I were to scroll right here, I got so many different columns. So in what I can do by changing the focus, I can limit and organize the columns of data. So all I'm going to do is change my focus to software images. And the reason I'm doing that will become obvious in just a moment. When I change the focus to software images, take note of this column right here, software image. Do you see where it says needs update? Well, team, the reason why it says needs update, that's because once we clicked on the golden image for that particular iOS image, DNA Center went out and did a check on all devices. So watch what happens. I'm going to click here on needs update, and I'm going to show you why DNA Center is telling us that this device and this device and this device and this device need updates. So let me click there and I'll show you. Now, what DNA Center does is when it sees that you are running a specific image, 1733 in this case, but the golden image specified for this device is not the running image, 1761, well, there's a mismatch. So when DNA Center sees that you are not running the golden image on a device, what happens? DNA Center says, timeout, I need to do some checks. I'm going to do some homework for you. So DNA Center does what's called an image update readiness check. And so it goes down and makes a lot of different checks, basically validating, is your upgrade going to perform successfully? And ultimately, after doing all those checks, DNA Center gives you an indicator, this little green circle with the, or green checkbox with the circle around it. That's DNA Center's way of giving you comfort that everything's going to be fine for this upgrade. So in this case, if we wanted to upgrade this device, we could do that now by simply clicking here and selecting Actions and Software Image and Image Update. Now, if I see here, I've got 121 devices in my inventory. If I want to filter out and just see which devices need to be upgraded, I could filter out on all the devices that have an outdated image. If I click Apply right here, that's going to give me a list of all those devices that have outdated images, and so that simplifies things for me. So if I wanted, I could simply select all the devices, click Action, Software Image, and Image Update, and then I can upgrade all those devices at the same time. Very simple screen. So basically, I'm going to go through. I'm going to specify commands that I want to be issued during the distribution, commands to be issued before and after the software activation. I could tell DNA Center exactly when I want to do the actual scheduling of the upgrade. So very easy workflow for image updates. Very straightforward, very easy. Okay, so that's software upgrades. Now, if I change my focus back to inventory here, we'll cover some other things. Now, I'm going to go into the inventory screen of one of the devices and show you a few things that we're able to see. So if we go into the inventory screen, first things first, we're able to see the actual physical depiction of all the ports and the status of the ports. So if you've got error disabled, if the ports are active, whatever the admin status, you're going to be able to see that. Okay. Also, we can get a list from a tabular format of all the ports, their status, operational, admin, etc. Right. So you can shut, no shut ports from here, all those functions you can do right from here. Now, for those of you who are wondering, where is my CLI config? Well, one place you see it is right here in the inventory for every one of your devices. You've got that config, and you're able to export that config in as an output as well. Also, globally, we do have the ability to archive all of the configs for your devices, so you can do that very easily. You can send that to an external server if you want as well. If I continue to scroll down, just a couple of things here I'd like to point out. Config drift. This is a wonderful way for DNA Center to track up to 50 configuration versions over the course of time. So you're able to compare very quickly the difference in two different configurations. In this case, we've got this highlighted config that's from 1:39 p.m. We've got a highlighted config from 12:39 p.m. And down below, we're comparing those. And what you see is the 1:39 p.m. config introduced spanning tree at a global level. DNA Center highlights this for you. If you wanted to, you could relabel the config to have a descriptive name such as STP added or whatever label you want, and you're able to track all those configs and compare one config version versus another. So you could see exactly what changes were made. In addition, you can see not only what changes were made, you can see what time those changes were made, and you can see who made the changes. Now, if I scroll down further here, just one other area, and I'm just bouncing around just to give you some highlights, team, but we can look at the compliance section, and we'll see here three different compliance aspects that we'll talk about at least today, is critical security advisories. This is where Cisco DNA Center is going out, analyzing, is the software image is there any known security incident? Is there a PCERT, from Cisco's terminology, is there a PCERT against this particular image? If there is, you can drill into the details. You can use a regex command and basically see, is your configuration, your CLI config, is it compliant or not, right? So you're able to see, do I have a security vulnerability against this image? Yes or no. It's very easy to figure that out. Also, we already knew for this device, we failed the software image compliance. We're running 17.3.3, but the golden is 17.6.1. So we could do that software upgrade, start triggering that process. And then finally, we see that we've got this red X here, which means we failed the compliance check, right? So we failed the compliance check for software images. We failed the compliance check for startup versus run. Why do we care about startup versus running configuration differences? Well, if you make a change to your config, which I'm sure everyone knows, you make a config change to your router or your switch, and then that router or switch reloads, what happens if you didn't save the changes? Well, you're going to lose the changes. So in this case, if I click here on startup versus run, what you're going to see is the DNA Center compares the running config versus a startup, and we can see you've got spanning tree here that's on the running config but not on the start. So if that device reloaded, you'd lose this config. So how do we rectify or reconcile this situation? We could simply click sync device config. We could do this on an individual device or at a bulk level if you had a lot of different devices that had config changes. But this makes sure that you don't lose configs on your devices. Happens all the time in many of our customer networks where customers go out, make changes to devices, and simply don't save the changes. This, in essence, will do a write mem, right, or a copy run start to your device, saving those configs, saving you headaches, saving you time, right? So that's, I guess, pretty much a summary of most of the, no, I think we got a few other provisioning things that I may want to talk about here as I recall. So let's see here. I think I might cover, let's go back to our inventory here. Let's talk about when you have RMA events in the network. Right? Let's say you have a switch that fails. What do you do? Well, a lot of times you got to figure out, oh, what was my config, right? What software? I got to worry about assembling all this. Well, with DNA Center, you don't have to worry about this. Imagine that this device fails. Building 1, floor 2 access. It's a Catalyst device there. So watch this. We're going to click actions and we're going to mark this device for replacement. So I'm going to click there, mark that device for replacement. Okay, so now if I go into my marked for replacement inventory, I should see that device. So if I click on this device, this allows me to start a workflow to replace the device. So imagine that device failed, I called TAC, TAC sends me a new device, right? So I plug that new device into the network, and then I click here in this workflow. So I click replace device. So what DNA Center does, it's going to go out, look for the devices that it now knows about, and oh, here's that device that TAC sent us, this serial number, right? It's unclaimed, and so what we can do is simply select that new device that we received from TAC, we click next, and DNA Center simply walks us through that workflow. So we can schedule the replacement for now, right? We can, we've got all the information right here, and watch this. DNA Center is placing the same image that was on that device from before, same license, same configuration, and we can verify what configuration was on that device. So all that information, all that's done for you. You don't have to worry about it. This RMA workflow is like many other workflows where Cisco DNA Center has made it very easy for you to take care of those network events that happen, you know, the RMA events, the putting config on devices events, all this, these types of workflows make operations very, very easy. So we would simply click replace. DNA Center is going to go out and do all those actions, right? So that's an example of the RMA workflow. Now, finally, if I go back to, and let me click back here, I'm just going to go back to my home screen here because I don't want to do all those things. I'm going to go back to my provisioning screen here for one last thing. Now, I talked about, if you recall, I talked about when we go into plug and play. That's talking about deploying brand new devices. Okay, so let's say that if we're not talking about brand new devices, but maybe you wanted to put config on an existing device. How would you do that? Well, in this case, you would simply select the device or devices. You would go into actions and provision device. And this is where you'd get one of the simplest workflows where effectively you're simply going and telling DNA Center in the next step here, you would see basically that DNA Center by default, because of the configuration of this environment, it had a template attached to those devices, the sites at those devices. And we see here the template is called SDG controller configuration. And so if I were to click here, well, it looks like my demo doesn't want to cooperate. I told you there might be one or two hiccups, but basically this is where DNA Center would push this template called SDG agent controller config to these two devices, and that's how easy pushing templates to devices is. Very simple workflow. So team, just wanted to be clear, whether you're provisioning a new device or an existing device, adding CLI, upgrading software, RMAing, very easy workflows, making those events extremely easy. Now, if I go back to my home screen here, let's see here. Let's talk about policy. I skipped over it a little while ago, so let's just drill into this very, very briefly. Now, for those of you who have talked or had anyone from Cisco or Cisco partner talk about DNA Center as it relates to segmentation, you may have heard a long time ago that you need to deploy software-defined access, also known as SDA. You do not need to do that. Some customers do implement SDA, but it's not a deployment architecture for everyone. So to be clear, you can use DNA Center in combination with Cisco Identity Services Engine to deploy what many of you may know as TrustSec. And you can use this in order to deploy some really highly functional access control, what we would call micro-segmentation. In this case, when you deploy ICE allows you to identify those endpoints, and if you're using TrustSec, you can identify those endpoints and place SGT, secure group tags, against those particular devices. So we would tag those devices packets, and you can see here, this is simply the name of the security groups. Once we can use these SGTs and apply them using ICE, which identifies those devices, then we can create policies. And this is the power of DNA Center in combination with ICE, is that we're able to make very easy contracts against who can talk to whom. And so in this case, for an example, let's say that we didn't want our guests, this is our source, guests. Would we ever want our guests to be able to talk to HVAC? Here's the intersection right here. Guests sending traffic to our HVAC systems. Team, should anyone ever want that to happen? I'm hoping not. So in this case, I can click on that intersection and I can change the contract, because right now there is no limitation on that traffic flow. I can simply click deny IP, I can click change, I can save now, and effectively what you see visually is that now if I look at guests talking to HVAC, that traffic is denied. Okay, so now I know that I'm protected. I can change those policies if I want, but basically this is the power of DNA Center when you enable when you enable ICE and you've got these devices configured to tag packets. All you have to do, go into the policy screen, you're able to make these isolated segments so that users can or cannot talk to users. Bidirectional policies there. And then if I go back here, one final aspect, if I go in and view the traffic for my security groups, I'm able to see, and this is really powerful. I've seen customer responses to this. They love this, is that you're able to see, let's look at my employees as for the employee devices. I can see that my employees now are talking to HVAC and talking to lighting, talking to guests and doctors. If that is not what I expect to be happening, I can then go and start to drill in, and I can change the contract so that employees can't talk to HVAC. Why would my employees need to talk to HVAC? Is that supposed to happen? Is it not? So I'm able to look at all those flows to get great visualization into what flows are taking place, and also for compliance reasons, especially for customers who have the need to report on compliance, I've got all the data to show that I have locked down my network. So the policy section, although we're only going to cover it briefly here, that's all I'm going to cover. Very, very powerful, especially for those customers who have high requirements for segmentation. So again, I encourage you, as I said in the start of this discussion, I encourage you, talk to your Cisco account teams and your partner account teams if you want to drill in more about segmentation. Now, finally, in the last 10 minutes here of our discussion, or 10 or 15, we're going to fly through what I call assurance, or what Cisco DNA Center calls assurance. So first things first, let's talk about critical issues. How is DNA Center going to make your troubleshooting life easier? Network events are going to happen most likely. So how do you troubleshoot them? Let me show you DNA Center's ability and power to do that. So in this case, I click there on the details here, and DNA Center tells me I've got 25 total open issues, and including 5 AI-driven issues. We'll talk about those in a moment. So if I look here, I've got 2 priority 1 issues, a few priority 2 issues, and some priority 3 issues. Now, let's troubleshoot a couple of these. So first one I'm going to take a look at, layer 2 loop symptoms. So if I click there, well, I guess I closed that down accidentally. So we click there, we get details about how pervasive the issue is. It's only affecting one building and one floor. We see the details related to what devices. Here's a couple of the host names of devices affected. Now, if I click here on the detail, or I click here on this hyperlink, that's going to give me details about the problem. And if we look here, what we see is we've got host MAC flaps that are detected, and this looks like a spanning tree loop. So what do we need to do? Well, DNA Center tells us this. It says go to the root cause analysis for detailed troubleshooting. So if we click here on root cause analysis, what do we see? DNA Center takes us to what I like to call the easy button of troubleshooting. DNA Center calls it the MRE, Machine Reasoning Engine. So what do? We click on Run Machine Reasoning. This will trigger an automated process where DNA Center goes out, analyzes other issues, collects information about those MAC flaps, checks the spanning tree topology for loops, verifies the port forwarding status, and then in a moment here, it will be done. So we click on View Details. DNA Center tells us the conclusion. What is that conclusion? Well, we know now there's a loop on VLAN 31. If we scroll down, we can see the devices and ports that are affected, and at the bottom, DNA Center tells us what to do. Here's a suggested action, which we need to enable spanning tree on VLAN 31 across those devices and ports. So in essence, DNA Center discovered the issue without you doing anything. You clicked a button to troubleshoot. DNA Center automated the troubleshooting, gives you the output of what devices are affected and what you're supposed to do. That's called Machine Reasoning Engine. It's one of the 2 mechanisms that DNA Center uses for troubleshooting, so that's the number 1 mechanism. Now, the number 2 mechanism I'll show you in just a moment. So again, that's called MRE, Machine Reasoning Engine. Makes troubleshooting easy. It is so much fun to see customers using that for the first time and seeing the power of how easy troubleshooting is. Now, I'm going to skip over a few of these, and I'm going to go to all of these are MRE issues, so you've already seen how MRE works. So I'm going to show you how another troubleshooting mechanism works. Let's see here. I'm going to go to PoE port in error state. So if I go to this particular issue, we've got a PoE port, it's an error state, pretty simple issue in theory. Let's click on the details. So basically we're seeing that this PoE port, it's an error disabled state. The reason power error detected. So what I want you to focus on is not the complexity of this particular issue, but what DNA Center tells you to do. So the suggested actions, this is what we call guided remediation. So basically DNA Center looks out and into the TAC knowledge database and says, okay, how would TAC support or troubleshoot this issue? And DNA Center makes a determination, oh, here are the 5 steps. So basically what we do is there's 5 steps. DNA Center says effectively you need to check the operational details of the interface. DNA Center tells you the command that you should run to do that. And you don't have to go out and issue the command because all you have to do is click run right here. DNA Center issues the command and gives you the output right here. So your job in the troubleshooting process is to read the step, click run, analyze the output, and continue in the troubleshooting process until you're done. If for some reason you get to the end on step 5 and you can't resolve the issue, what do? Well, you go out here, you call TAC, and then you give them remote support authorization, and then you can continue through the troubleshooting journey. That's how easy troubleshooting is, whether you're using the machine reasoning engine or whether you're using guided remediation. DNA Center makes it very easy to troubleshoot. It's like having a built-in TAC engineer right there or a built-in CCIE. So makes troubleshooting very easy. Now, one other thing, I'm going to go back to my first page. DNA Center is tracking AI-generated issues. So if you see here, we got all these AI issues. They're all these wireless issues. And DNA Center is phenomenal for wireless assurance, among many other things. But if we click here, for example, on this issue, drop in total radio throughput. So if I go in and start to click on the details here, what I see is there's a 97% drop in throughput from the baseline. Okay, well, you may be wondering, what do you mean baseline? What's that? Well, if we click on the details here, DNA Center tells us that this issue is triggered based on a deviation from a predicted baseline. What does that mean? Well, basically what we're doing is this, is that as your AP over the course of time, we look at your performance and we make predictions based on previous history. We're predicting what the future performance is, right? And so very statistically well-known concepts here is that we're making predictions about the future performance here. And so if you see this, the graph here that we're demonstrating what the problem is, right? We're showing you in blue, this is the actual performance of the AP. So as long as that performance, that blue line, is between the predicted upper and lower boundaries, which is the shaded area, so as long as that blue line is staying between the shaded area, that means that everything looks good. But watch what happens. Look and see when you see that that blue line went way outside of the predicted lower boundary. See the red shaded area? That means DNA Center is triggering a warning to you saying something is wrong, you need to take a look. So at 1 a.m., if we were watching this network, we would know that DNA Center is seeing something's wrong. And in fact, look at the throughput. The throughput at 1 a.m. was 25 kilobits per second. But if you see on the screen here, the predicted lower boundary was 899 kilobits per second. We are way below the predicted lower boundary. So at this point, we have a problem. Right? So let's look at what DNA Center tells us about that problem. At 1 a.m., we could then see who's impacted. Well, if we started getting calls from George and Gordon and Grace and Oliver, right? We know why, because this issue is impacting them and many other users. So that's one great thing that we already need to know is what is the extent of the impact and who specifically is impacted. We can look at impacted clients, also the applications that are impacted. For time's sake, I want to look at root cause analysis. Now, you've already seen this data, this first graph up above. This graph you just saw. At 1 a.m., we start to see a throughput drop. But look what happens at the same time. We're plotting interference down here in this graph and channel utilization in this graph, right? So look what happens at 1 a.m. At 1 a.m., we see that the interference goes to 65% and effectively, so interference skyrockets, channel utilization plummets. What's our problem? We've got an interference issue, right? And so if we look at this, DNA Center gives us exactly the suggested actions, which are to take a look at, well, you can consider adding a 5 gigahertz radio. You can check for interference sources, which is my theory here, and that's the one I'm going to stick with. And so in essence, what you can do is, at this point, we know that this AP, this is the host name of the AP. If I want to go to the AP itself, I can go type in AP0081. I can click on that AP, I can go to device 360, and this is where, team, for those of you who are familiar with wireless, I can get on the device 360 for an AP, I can click on intelligent capture, and then I can go to what's called a spectrum analysis, among many other things on this screen I can see. And by the way, the device 360 screen gives you all the operational details for a device, including live data regarding clients and channel utilization and other things. But I can click right here on spectrum analysis, and this, I could click on start spectrum analysis, and it's going to do exactly what you think, or exactly what the button says. It's going to run a spectrum analysis, and you're going to be able to see very quickly, is there something stomping on one of your wireless channels? Is there an interference source? If so, what channel or channels? What's the duty cycle? So you're able to use these tools very quickly to identify, is there a problem in my network? Is there a problem with interference? What's the issue? DNA Center gives you all these tools right at your fingertips. So this is a troubleshooting an interference issue. Now, let's say that I had a user call up and it was a wireless client and they're having a problem. How would I troubleshoot that? Well, in this case, I could click on my search tool, user calls up, they give me their name. Let's suppose it's Grace Smith. So I start typing Grace in. I can see Grace's devices. I can click on Grace as a user, go to Grace's 360 screen, and on one screen, I'm going to see all of Grace Smith's devices. In this case, when the screen populates, I can see Grace has an iPad, an iPhone, a PC, and a Galaxy S10. Now, we've selected her iPad. So in this case, what you see in this first part of the screen, I'm seeing her user experience, and this data, this is the plot of her health score. So you basically could see the green health score, that's when it's between 8 and 10, and then the yellow, and then red, right? So you can see basically between 8:50 p.m. and about 1:45 a.m., Grace did not have a good user experience. In fact, she couldn't get on the network. So if we had to troubleshoot this issue, we've got all of the data historically to figure out, why didn't Grace Smith have access to the network on the iPad? So if I scroll down, and by the way, if you saw the detail down here in this section, as I scroll from right to left, you're able to see all the 5-minute data related to that user. So you're going to see onboarding events, you're going to see status failures, you're going to see what AP, what the signal to noise ratio, all that data is right there. Okay, now if I scroll down, I'm able to start troubleshooting the user issues, whether they were having application issues, etc. So same troubleshooting techniques that I already showed you, they're all right here. But one of the most powerful thing, or a few powerful things I want to share with you before we adjourn here, Event Viewer. This is one of the most powerful aspects of client troubleshooting. You're able to see all of the user's events based on onboarding. So whether it's DHCP or AAA or 802.1x, you're able to see all the protocol events of that client interfacing with the network in order to access the network. So if you couldn't get that device on the network, you're going to know exactly why. And not only are you going to know why and when, but you actually oftentimes will have a PCAP file, which you can download and drill in and get more details. So all of this tells you exactly why the device can't get on the network, okay? So that's one aspect. But one thing in addition I want to show you is that because we know this device is an iPad, we can look down, and in just a moment here, I'll show you that we can click on this iOS Analytics tab. Now, DNA Center has integration with Apple, with Android, and with Intel. Why do you care about that? Because not only do we see the network side of onboarding, but we see the client side too. So we can see things like this iPad. We can see what APs it sees, right? It's shown in a table here, but it's also shown visibly right here. But what I love is the client disassociation details. In this case, we can see all of the reasons when and why the client disassociated from the network. Now, you may be thinking, why does this matter? Well, for one of our customers, it mattered significantly. One of our healthcare providers, they had nurses that were wondering, why are they not getting their messages immediately for hospital-related events? And what was happening was their software on their devices was disabling the device every 5 minutes, or it was powering down the device to save battery. So because that battery save mode was being implemented, they weren't getting their messages. How did they figure this out? Well, what they did was they figured out with DNA Center that they were seeing user-triggered disassociations. What that was, it's that MDM software that was powering down or putting the device in save mode. So were it not for DNA Center, they wouldn't have recognized that. So they saw that every 5 minutes the devices were going into that mode. And so the customer was able to figure out, okay, let's change the software. Let's stop that user-triggered disassociation or that power down mode. Problem solved. This is the power of having the client details plus the network details. If it's a network issue, we know about it. If it's a client issue, we know about it. All right here, one screen. Wireless client troubleshooting, wired client troubleshooting, very, very easy. Now, let's see, a few other things. I talked about integrations that DNA Center has with other Cisco platforms. We can see here WebEx 360 button here. Let me click there and show you what that's all about. So in this case, because I've got integration with WebEx, I can access the WebEx Control Hub and I can see what Grace Smith, Grace Smith, I almost typed her username wrong here. Grace Smith, I can go in and look for Grace's WebEx meetings. So I can basically see what was the overall performance of the meetings she attended, and if I want to drill down and click and get more details about what was the overall experience of her audio, video, her sharing. So if there's a problem in the network, I'd know exactly what was going on. For time's sake, not going to drill into this too much, but just so you know, we can see every user, we're able to see their WebEx quality of their meetings, the quality of their WebEx meetings. Now, some other things here related to integrations. If I go back to my home screen here, we talked about health, and I've run out of time here, folks, but let me cover a few things. If I go into the details of health, I can look at applications as an example. And for any of you who have heard of Thousand Eyes, right? So I encourage you, if you haven't heard Thousand Eyes, contact Cisco partners or your account team and get an intro to Thousand Eyes. One of the things that you can use Thousand Eyes for, of course, is to run tests within and outside of your network to pinpoint why can't you get access to certain services, whether internal or external to your network. So in this case, I've got Thousand Eyes tests running, DNA Center integration with Thousand Eyes, so I can see the tests that are being run. In this case, I see packet loss 100% on one of my tests. So in this case, I've got an Office 365 test that I'm running. So this is failing. That means I've got an Office 365 problem. So if I click here, this is going to cross launch to my Thousand Eyes login, and I can see the path visualization to Office 365. In this case, when I look at the details here, what I can see is that everything within my network is good. If I click on the button here, for example, this is all in my network. I can see here, if I continue to go out, I can start to look and see this is Cisco, and then I go further, and now I can see this is my ISP. If I continue further, I can see this is in Microsoft's network, and then I can get further into Microsoft's network, and ultimately right here, if you see this, 100% packet drop. It's all the way into Microsoft's network where I see this 100% packet drop. So I know my Office 365 connections, the issue, it's not with my network. It's not with my ISP. It's a Microsoft issue. Who do I call? I call Microsoft. I don't call my ISP, and I don't have an internal problem. This is the power of Thousand Eyes and the integration with DNA Center of being able to isolate where is that application issue, my network, ISP, or the application provider. Narrows it down very quickly for you. And this is just one of many powerful use cases of Thousand Eyes. So I encourage you, reach out to your account teams there. Now, one final thing before we finish up here, and again, the attempt here, team, was to simply show you just kind of a high level of some of the features of DNA Center. One thing last but not least, if I go into my design section, I want to show you something powerful about Cisco Wireless for network maps here, or 3D maps. So if I go out here to my San Jose location here, and I'm going to go in our hierarchy, this is where we can put our floor maps for our wireless plan here. And once this screen comes up, I'm going to see a two-dimensional floor map here, although it says not available. And I just checked this demo environment. Okay, well, it looks like it's working now. So what I see here is two-dimensionally, right? it looks like I've got good coverage. Green is pretty much everywhere, but I've got some yellow areas here, so not as good, but still not bad, right? Now, let's look at 3D maps here, though. The three-dimensional map, I'm able to see at the overall wireless coverage at a certain height throughout this geographic or through this floor. So as soon as this screen comes up, what I want to show you is we have the ability to see what's the RF coverage at a certain height off the ground. So if you have users walking around that particular floor, doesn't look like it's coming up. I'm hoping to get this to work. Paul, my colleague out there, is probably laughing at me right now. Paul, I promise you I had this working earlier. I may close this down. I'm going to give this we'll give this one more moment here. Now, as I'm waiting for this, basically what we're going to see is we're going to see a similar map to the 2D map, but we're able to use what's called the scanner and then use a cut height to basically DNA Center will depict what is that RF coverage for that particular height. Doesn't look like it's coming up. I'm going to close this down real quick. I'm going to log back into DNA to the dCloud session here and try to restart that. My apologies, team. I do want to finish up on a high note here, so let me see if I can get in there one more time. Any of my esteemed colleague co-hosts out there, if you have access to dCloud and you want to save me from humiliation, feel free to see if you can get your demo environment to work there. I'm going to go back here real quick, see if I can get into that particular floor, and then we'll see if we can get that 3D map running here. I'm getting that error message up here that's not making me feel comfortable.
Hey, Aaron, I've got the 3D.
Do you mind? I apologize, my brother. Could you possibly put your
No
screen?
worries.
This is teamwork at its finest right now, Paul. So if you don't mind sharing your screen, if you can put that up there, and I'll
throw it up here.
I'll let you do your magic.
Okay.
But basically, yeah, as I alluded to, we got a demo, issue here. Oh, beautiful screen here, Paul. Take it away if you want, or I can speak to it. Either way.
Okay. So basically, I think what Aaron was getting at here was that, we have the traditional 2D view, which, as he mentioned, looks pretty good. Lots of green everywhere. But we live in a 3D world, and you can click on the 3D view. And this is a view overlooking a room full of racks. So there's several different views you can see here. One is this point cloud, but one of the ones I really like is the scanner view, because it allows you to basically see the coverage at any height you want within the environment. So right now I'm just clicking on the mouse button, right mouse button, and moving around. You can see I can move this to view it any way I want from any angle. And then you could set your cut height here, which is the height that you want to take a look at the coverage. So you can see as I'm going towards the ceiling here, it's moving up. But in the case of most humans, it would be operating down in 4 or 5 feet. And you can see, yes, indeed, at that height, there are potential issues where we have red zones where we're not getting the coverage we expected.
Fantastic, Paul. Great job. I appreciate you saving me once again. I'm giving you a big hug virtually, man. So, well, team, I know we've gone 75 or 73 minutes. I hope this has been beneficial. I strongly encourage you. Well, first of all, Carrie, Paul, and team, I did not see any questions that came up. I don't know if there were some that I missed. I'll pause. Any questions out there that we can attempt to address before we shut down here? If not, I really appreciate everyone's time. I strongly encourage you, please reach out to your Cisco account team, your Cisco partner teams, in order to further the discussions if you have any questions, and they can pull in Global Virtual Engineering or other resources to continue the discussion for things like DNA Center, Thousand Eyes, WebEx, etc. So with that, I thank all my esteemed co-hosts here, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, all.